Oh, here we go again. Now Gaz is jumping on the bandwagon, I hear you say. While the internet rips itself apart as the gaming industry has seemingly decided that replacing testosterone with almond milk is a good idea and better for the art form. Developers across the West have waged holy war on our traditional ideas of beauty because it's us men that are apparently the problem. Anna de Armas, how dare you objectify women and think this is attractive?
Unacceptable condition! Unacceptable!
If her BMI isn't over 9,000 and she isn't suffering from atrial fibrillation as a result of cholesterol clogging up her ventricles, and at the bare minimum if she hasn't got short hair dyed in an appropriate warning signal hue, then do you really appreciate real women? Well, the gaming industry doesn't think so, and the crusade of Western devs to educate the masses is quite obvious, especially when compared to their Eastern counterparts.
Rated M for mature.
Almost every other game now is a reflection of that mandate, and well, it's starting to get a little bit tiresome. If you were to roll your eyes every time a Western dev and its game tried to educate you in this way, it would look like your corneas were shoved into a tumble dryer, or worse, Louis Spencer's arse.
What about the crawl? You know you're doing the crawl and the contract relief, round, down, up, there.
But the issue isn't just that Western devs that are seeking to do this, it's the actual discourse surrounding this. Like with all things, it seems, it's the extremes on all sides of the argument that dominate the conversation because, well, why wouldn't they? It's typical, isn't it? So what am I gonna do? I'm just gonna compound the problem by adding my toxicity into the mix because you don't deserve a better level of discourse than this. Yeah! In the red corner, you have your trademark incel who has never touched a woman in his life and relies wholly on his collection of hentai pillows to initiate any kind of intimacy with what he thinks is a member of the opposite sex, but is really just fabric doused in the most disgusting form of liquid hellscape known to man.
Does this look like the body of an incel? Does this look like the home gym of an incel? This is my deluxe Magna Carta. Stop the censorship. We're tired.
This petition is not only to free Stellar Blade, but to send a clear message to Sony, Nintendo, and the rest of the publishers in the gaming industry that we players will not tolerate any form of censorship.
And worse still, the biggest voices seemingly against this woke movement is a collection of absolutely moronic, socially stunted, rotund tosspots. So, even if you want to publicly call out the blatantly obvious attempts at the industry shoving its idea of enlightenment down our throat, you run the risk of being associated with these lot. I mean, just look at them. Hardly candidates for male models, but repeatedly crying about how ugly women in gaming are. Mark Kern, aka Grumps. This man is leading the movement with his legacy after working on World of Warcraft being this failed excuse of a bang bust that cost $3 million, all to promote a game that was still in pre-alpha and which ended up failing miserably anyway.
Woke mob, this means war. Grums, you have my sword and you have my shield.
And now he's successfully fleecing his blind followers out of hundreds of thousands of dollars on what looks like something a 12-year-old cobbled up in 3 hours messing about with Unreal Engine on his Pentium 2 PC. Then you've got Ian Miles Shong, who suffers from one of the most extreme examples of derangement syndrome known to man. He wakes up thinking he's a member of the Aryan race, tall, muscular, blonde, hair blowing in the wind, but in reality, it looks like he licks windows for a profession as he wrestles with the reality that he isn't the Western Caucasian man he so desperately wants to be, but an overweight bloke sitting in Malaysia spending his days digitally sucking off Elon Musk, Israel, and whatever grift he can attach himself to ensure that the shekels keep coming his way. But then, in the blue corner, you have your bevy of virtue-signaling multicolored hair forever victims who will instantly dismiss any notion of entertaining a remotely opposing view as their misplaced superiority complex has them twerking with reckless abandon. You know the type. pronouns slapped in their bio, drive-by hollow social awareness posts, hardcore Sarkeesian fans, which makes them a prime candidate for one of the most intellectually vapid NPCs on the planet, socially scissoring their way through social media with the track marks peppered on their arms, courtesy of the countless boosters they've injected into themselves as Big Pharma sponsors their heart palpitations, which they blame on everyone else but the gigantic scroll of mental disorders they quite obviously suffer from.
So, I'm non-binary.
Who the starts a conversation like that? I just sat down.
No dragon escaped.
Thanks to Tosh.
That's why we recruited her.
Actually, Tosh uses them for themselves now.
They asked us to let folks know, so now you do.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you for telling me. That's why we recruited them.
What is actually happening to game design, the aesthetics, and the stories being told in our beloved hobby? Well, why don't you take a look? The Saints Row reboot serves as a great example of the bastardization of our hobby. The developers thought that they would modernize the classic game that was once an open-world gangster simulator where you won by, well, just being a gangster and killing everyone. But the word gangster is the furthest thing from your mind when you look and listen to this shit.
As an investor, I don't like wasting money. You're wearing a fucking bow tie. Okay, I will throw in $20 for a waffle maker.
Nina?
Good for 10?
Who helped you move your forged paintings last month?
Fine, 15.
What sort of waffle maker can I get for $35?
Presumably one that makes fucking waffles?
Hey, the wage slave is back.
It's the murder business. The fundamentals don't change, just the uniform.
I can tell you love it.
Okay, I don't have to love it, I have to pay my student loans.
Amen.
You can almost see what was on their checklist of priorities when deciding to embark on this project, and a good game ranked a lot lower than the skittled flavored puberty blockers they prescribed. Now, take a look at what the original game was like.
Man, fuck the rollers. LeVar, you gonna let those bitches disrespect us? Shit, what you think?
What the fuck you think you're doing?
Just being civic-minded is all.
That's so?
Yeah, some dumbass cracker went and shit all over this wall. We just cleaning it up.
Hector says buenas noches.
Shit!
Yeah, take me back. Go woke, go broke. You probably heard that phrase shout out multiple times by some weirdo with an anime PFP on his socials, but that phrase seems to have a lot more truth to it than some may want to admit. Concord is one very glaring and recent example of this truth. The game was apparently in development for 8 years, cost hundreds of millions of dollars, only to be shut down in exactly 2 weeks from its launch. I wonder why. It surely had nothing to do with these incredible character designs, because when you want to unwind from a long day's graft, the first thing you want to do is play as a type 25 diabetic whose tits you could milk harder than PlayStation milks its fan base.
Let's go. This'll be fun.
You might think it's not fair to blame the character designs for this game's failures. Well, it would help if good game design was higher on the pecking order, but alas, a robot with pronouns couldn't even save the game and the studio from being shut down.
All right, another satisfied customer.
This virus can even afflict the most legendary of studios. Rocksteady had an incredible reputation for their Batman Arkham games. Then they decided to spend $200 million and countless years to make Suicide Squad, and then Mr. Freeze became Mrs. Freeze, an interdimensional butch lesbian trying to save her popsicle wife. And now Suicide Squad can be bought for less than a packet of crisps, and this game is about to get shut down very soon as well. Speaking of imminent shutdowns, let's talk about Ubisoft. Assassin's Creed Shadows. Controversy has defined this game. The quintessential example of what's wrong with game development. This is a title built purely on checklists, which is ironic because that's what Ubisoft's game formula is known for. An elaborate checklist exercise reskinned and redelivered countless times. You see, the protagonist in Assassin's Creed Shadows is a large black man. I personally didn't think that was much of an issue after watching a small white man tear it up in The Last Samurai. But then I learned about the utterly abysmal development journey for this game. Ubisoft just plucked teams to work on this project with the kind of precision Michael J. Fox would have conducting microsurgery on someone's retinas. Ubisoft didn't even consult their Japanese team on this properly before greenlighting it. Ubisoft is in dire straits, and they announced this many months ago. And for their last attempts at salvation, as a company, they think that this would be their savior? Well, that's what the board thought, but the developers within them know that this title has no chance in hell of saving Ubisoft after a series of absolutely utter failures where even Star Wars couldn't even save them because, yeah. Now, I don't really peg the Assassin's Creed games as one known for their historical accuracy, but in a shocking revelation, it turns out that the Japanese are a lot more caring about the preservation of their history than we are. The issue even got raised at Japanese parliament. Ubisoft issued a statement about how much care it put into respecting Japanese culture. And then the Japanese absolutely blew Ubisoft's back out by exposing that lie with such great examples as Chinese architecture in Japanese cities and the Torygate scandal, where Ubisoft and its partners decided that it would be genius to have your side character planted on a Torygate that resembles the one and only half Torygate in Japan that marks the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. Such great care and attention. The latest game to cause controversy had to come from Naughty Dog. Obviously, you could see this coming from a mile away. Naughty Dog's new game, where the main protagonist is a butch-looking woman that Neil Druckmann obviously has a penchant for. Intergalactic, Druckmann's latest project revealing itself with product placement galore, but it was missing that one sponsor that was on everyone's mind. Neil likes to think of himself as a visionary, like Hideo Kojima. He also likes to lecture the gamer about the inequities of life. He stresses the importance of communicating the deeper messages in his games, but simultaneously disables comments on trailers for his game so that you're left in no doubt regarding his stance for silly little concepts like freedom of expression. But then you need to understand where he gleans his values from, and how the suppression and control of people's voices has been drilled into his very psyche. The irony compounds itself multiple times over when you realize who Druckmann really is. A man pushing Israeli propaganda not so subtly in his game and then being called out by other Israeli journalists on it. The Vice article is linked in the description below if you care to read it. But I know you don't care about that shit and the genocide and all that. Back to more important things like character design. Character design has been one of the most focal points in this whole argument and discourse surrounding all of this. A couple of generations ago, no one really complained about female protagonists. Not like this, anyway. And that's because developers dared to make them look attractive, because gaming has and continues to be a male-dominated medium. We men are simple creatures. It's not rocket science, and I don't know why people are scared to acknowledge that, or try to reprogram us. We've been so dulled by the constant stream of this kind of shit that when a game from the Far East comes out that abandons the strictures of modern day Western design, it's like a hit of adrenaline. But then the Far East goes into the complete opposite direction and has female characters that make Dead or Alive beach volleyball look halal. So we're caught up between the guys who think that a barely clothed woman is normal versus your virtue signaling specimens like this guy. Of course he would say this. I mean, just look at him. She's gorgeous, he pretends in public for some brownie points whilst having minimal donor hairs on his own head to get a successful hair transplant. Maybe he just wants to believe. Social media is full of these vapid, two-dimensional creatures. When Warhammer Space Marines 2 arrived, it felt like someone had fisted 5 kilograms of smelling salts up my nostrils. That shit was amazing. Pure testosterone in the game, and unashamedly itself. I didn't have to listen to a lecture or get life advice from an NPC. The lack of social commentary in this game almost felt jarring. It's as if we've been institutionalized by a Sweet Baby Inc.'s manifesto so subtly for so long that enjoying a game like Space Marines 2 almost came with a sense of guilt. Almost. Look, let's not get it twisted, yeah? A lot of the hatred for character design is also steeped in racism. It doesn't take much to discover that. We've seen it countless times. Some people just have a melanin intolerance, and then they struggle to hide their double standards in their haste to grift. And so people in the middle of it all don't even get involved in these discussions. I don't blame them. They just watch the racists pretend their contentions are based on more than just base intolerance, or the habitual social point-scoring advocates gargling incessantly, both replete with any real original thought or sincerity. The desire for representation isn't inherently bad, but the problem is that the game industry and the companies within them are just imposing their brand of representation on everyone, like Microsoft's new Gaming for Everyone product inclusion framework that cautions developers to avoid curvy female characters. Why? Is it nobility that guides Microsoft in imposing this framework to perhaps lessen the societal pressures on women to achieve unrealistic beauty standards, and therefore maybe Druckmann's idea of a woman is more palatable? If you believe that, then I have some VIP tickets to Fire Festival 2 you might be interested in. The legacy and conduct of these companies would make any rational, informed human being realize the absolutely fundamental truth that is literally staring us in the face every day. These companies do not give a shit about you. Why on earth would you delegate the task to the corporate machine that prioritizes profit above all else? We're all victims to the fake social pantomime displayed in front of us and sponsored by big business. You cannot escape it. The scale of this movement is massive, and as much as people want to deny it publicly, most people don't want this so-called idea of representation in their games. Not the way the developers are forcing it down our throats. It does a disservice to the very marginalized groups it's supposed to represent, and it incites even more social tension against minorities as hate gets misdirected to the passengers who, like everyone else, just want to get on with their lives. So what do we do about this? Well, I think continuing to voice opposition is a more productive course of action than committing seppuku, but the tricky part is not being lumped in with this collection of absolute melts that appear to have a monopoly on this talking point. But it's a risk worth taking, no? Because why should you relegate yourself to a reality where the losers are guiding the art through their mandates on both sides? And what if what we see is the art that developers actually want to share? Huh? Don't be fooled, you idiots. Very few are like this. Just look at the development of Assassin's Creed Shadows and its checklist development. Many developers' voices are being sequestered and beaten down. They don't want to lose their jobs after all. And you are free in what you think, but prisoner to what you say. So why don't we vote with our wallets? Corporations only really care about their bottom dollar. So stick it to the man that way, yeah! But we're a fickle bunch. We need our gaming fix, so then we become part of the problem. Voting with your wallet seems like a redundant exercise. You feel so infinitesimally small in a sea of gamers, like a lone sperm cell caught in the tide within Neil Druckmann's fantastical throat. But that defeatist attitude will get us nowhere. Why should you listen to me of all people on this matter? After all, I'm just a crazy sand person who looks like he's been afflicted with a heavy bout of rabies in his videos, spouting and rapping occasionally about which plastic gaming box is better and which fandom is worse. But the few singular numbers of you who can glean satire from reality and discern layers behind the frankly not so well disguised mandate might understand where I'm coming from. I'm just telling you how I feel. And I think there's some value in that, as opposed to the virtue-signaling spineless protoplasmic peons that shit out the usual diarrhea every day. Maybe all of this is just a gross overcorrection, but I think the half-life of this pandering nonsense is waning, and I'm hoping things will change. Let the weirdos on both sides jostle back and forth in their internet tug-of-war, whilst we get caught in the crossfire between basement-dwelling incels clutching their jizz-stained waifu pillows versus the paragons of virtue shrieking, "Yes, queen!" like it's a battle cry. Cue the credits. Cue the credits, roll the tumbleweed, and pass the spliff, because I think we're gonna be here for a while. Yeah. Yeah.